Hello, Brother Sewing and Crafting family. Angela Wolf here, Brother Brand Ambassador, and we have another fabulous show for you today. Today we've got Ambassador Emily Thompson on, and she's going to show you how to pattern hack some sweatpants. She's making them for Rose. Rose is going to be super excited about this. But in the meantime, say hi, say where you're from. If you were under that massive storm yesterday, you know that we're probably digging out from snow right now. So let's think of some sunshine. Well, say hi. We are streaming on Brothers YouTube and Facebook pages. And let's welcome Emily. Emily, how are you?
I'm good. So glad to be here today. And excited to be sewing.
I'm so happy to see you. So I actually picked a banner to match your top because you look fabulous. And it kind of gives me a little spring feel, even though we're buried under snow right now. So I think I might be making these sweatpants for me today.
Yes, it's definitely sweatpants season. And the theme that I was given today was athleisure wear, which is one of the things I absolutely love to sew, including this top. It's so comfy, and I don't even know, but I found this fun, textured sweatshirt fabric at some point a couple years ago. So I was able to use it to make something unique, which is fun. Today we're working with just plain sweatshirt fleece, which is always a favorite of mine. And I think looks great almost every time I make something with it. So there's always those times where it didn't quite turn out. But so today we're going to be making a pair of sweatpants. It's a quick and easy project, and I'm excited to do it.
I'm very excited for this, and I know Rose is going to love getting another pair of pants.
Yes, she absolutely is. So I just was going to real quick actually show you the original pattern that I'm using for this. And so if I could just do a quick screen share. I have it pulled up. This is not going to be long here, but I just was going to show you. Can you see that? Sorry, did you need,
yes.
If you could.
I got it.
Switch over. Okay. All right. So this is the original pattern that I am using, and it's a unisex sweatpants pattern that I've used for my kids many, many times over the years. And you can see here at this point, I sewed 3 different versions for each one of the kids, and they were way, way smaller when Rose is probably wearing this size now that Jack was wearing in this thing. But you can see how it's kind of like just an oversized baggy sweatpants, and I would put cuffs or bands on the bottom of the sweatpants. So today what I'm going to do is we're going to slightly edit the pattern to one, make it lower rise, because Rose really doesn't like anything that comes up high on her stomach at all. She refuses to pull things up, and so if it's really slouchy, then it just looks not nice. So I usually cut an inch off everything that I'm making for her off the top. So I've already done that to the pattern, but I'm also going to widen the legs. And so we won't be cuffing it. We'll just be making sort of a wide leg loungewear sweatpants, which is very popular right now and super comfortable. I myself like wearing that sort of pants. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to also put pockets in the side seam.
That sounds good. And those are very on trend right now. As far as even for adults, for travel, that's all I see in the airport are these pants, which are super comfy. But I'm with Rose. I am short-waisted, and I cannot stand having, I have a pair that I bought. I should have made them. I'm going to be altering them because I pulled them up and they were this high. I said to my husband, who needs leggings that are their waist is right here?
Yes. So I don't mind high-waisted things. I don't want ultra high-waisted. So I try to, especially when I'm sewing for her, make those edits because I can and make it the way that she wants. So we're going to head over and take a look at the cutting table, and I'm going to show you just a little bit what I'm doing to the legs of the pants to make them more wide leg and less just straight baggy leg.
Perfect. All right. Well, she's headed over to the table. I just want to let you guys know we are live in the chat today, so I will not be bringing your comments up live, but we are live in the chat. So ask your questions. Even if you're watching the replay, you can ask them too, because Brother Social will send them to us so we can answer for you. All right. I got you at the table, Emily.
Okay. So here is the back. You can see I wrote that on there. I will also say the original pattern is a single pattern piece, which means the back and the front were connected here at the side. I did cut it apart and then add a little bit of seam allowance on there, because every time I make something, she says, does it have pockets? And of course, it's much easier to put pockets in if you have a side seam. So, and that just looks a little bit better, I think, for these kind of lounge pants as well, and makes it where you can add width to both the inside and the outside of the pant leg, which is ideal if you're trying to widen the pant leg. So I'm just going to cut across the bottom here. All right, so we have that cut. And my drafting book says that ideally you want to add the same width to both sides of the pant leg. But however, on this one, you can see that it comes in a little bit more than this one. It's not a truly straight leg. It is a little bit of taper. So from the hip on the side seam up here, I've stopped cutting there. We are going to flare out just slightly, probably around an inch on the inside or the outside of the leg. And then it probably will be a little bit closer to 2 inches that will pull down from the hip to flare out on the inside of the leg. And I've done this before. I don't really have a pattern for it. I just sort of eyeball it up. But so I'm going to start with that inch here on the bottom. And I know I'm a little bit off screen, but you'll see me here just in a second. There's the rotary cutter coming into the frame. And I'm just going to ease from this 1 inch out up to about where the hip is up here and connect that additional width that I gave it to where the original pattern was set. Okay, so we've added an inch on the outside, and then we're going to do the same on the inside, but like I said, I'm going to try to add closer to 2 inches. So I'm going to start with that 2-inch mark out. You'll see this. There we go. See the rotary cutter coming in just a little bit. I know the frame isn't perfect, but then we're going to ease up here to come into where those pants were originally cut at the inseam. All right, so now we've added width to both sides of the pant leg, a little bit more on the inseam due to the tapered nature, but essentially we're going for a straight-legged pant. And let me just show you what it looks like up at the hip where you couldn't see that. I had lots of magnets. I have like 3 more yards of this fabric hanging off the side of my cutting table. So it was really pulling over. So I was trying to get it really stuck down so I wouldn't pull that fabric. But let me just pull this up here to show you what the rest of it looks like. Okay. So you can see here, I just kept the top on the same here. This is about 1 inch to 1.5 inches shorter than the original pattern was, and all I did was compare it to a pair of pants, sweatpants that Rose likes the height, to determine how tall to make the rise. I am going to add a waistband to this, so it'll be a little bit taller. And then from here, I cut just a couple inches with the original pattern, and then here's where I eased back in from the bottom of the leg where I was adding that width. And then the same here. So we're going from about the same on the hips to where we're easing out and adding that width. All right. So now we have the back of the pants. I have the waistband that I pre-cut. It is about 5 inches wide because I'm using 2-inch elastic, which I love for athletic wear to use a wider elastic. We have 4 pockets cut with the sweatshirt fleece. And then I have the front of the pants, which I did the same thing. You can see the bottom, the added width on the inside and the outside of the leg. Okay, so that is what we're working with, and we're going to get started sewing those. The first thing I'm going to do, and then we'll probably come back to the table a few times here just to see how things are coming together and to put the pockets and things. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to sew the front and back curved rise seams here, and then we'll be able to put the pockets on the sides before we put the rest of it together. This comes together really quickly. It's not a complicated project, but it does turn out so cute. Okay, so I'm gonna adjust my camera real quick to face the serger a little bit better, and then we'll sew up these seams.
That sounds good. So if you have questions, drop them in the chat. And in case you missed it, you can find this pattern on Emily's website. And she also has a ton of tutorials on there too. So if you need more specifics, but this is good. So Emily, are you going to be using the airflow serger, I'm guessing? And what sewing machine will you be using today?
So I have out right now the airflow serger, which I'm absolutely using. And then I have, ooh, that's a bit bright on the airflow serger.
I thought we were there. We're almost there.
So I have the airflow serger, and then behind I have the Stella Air out. So I will be using that. Obviously, you could use any sewing machine. We're going to be just doing some very basic things with the sewing machine at the end, some top stitching and some, anchoring that elastic. But otherwise, this project is almost entirely can be sewn using the serger.
Perfect. All right, I've got you up there, and I will let you take it away. I will be monitoring the comments.
Okay. Perfect. So here we have the sweatshirt fleece. You can see that it's flat on the right side. And then I have right sides together. And then you have the fleecy background, which makes for super cozy athletic wear. And we're just going to sew with about a 1/4 inch, which is 1/4 inch to 1 centimeter is usually standard that I put on my patterns. I don't myself like to take a big seam allowance, especially for knit clothing. So I don't design with a big seam allowance. I know that not everyone loves that, but that's just sort of my personal preference and how I end up designing the clothes. So if you are ever sewing one of my outfits, it will say what the seam allowance is, but you can bet that it's 1/4 of an inch or 1 centimeter. That's a pretty equal equivalent. All right, so there we have I didn't have any red serger thread, so I put some brown in the needles, and I think it's gonna do well there. I did have some woolly nylon that I put in the looper that was red, so that's nice and soft on that seam as well. All right, so that is the front of the pants. Now we have the back of the pants. Now these I cut with the right sides out, so I'm gonna quick grab these, flip them right side in, so that we can go ahead and sew these up. And if you ever are not sure about the back and the front, the back always has a deeper scoop on the curved line, and it should have a higher rise. So you can compare the distance of the rise as well as the scoopiness of the curve to see which is the back and the front. Very rarely would that not work to determine your front and back, should you get them confused, or if all 4 pieces got mixed up, you could use those tips to help sort them back out. I'm sure most of you are well aware of that, but it's good to mention. Okay, so now we have that sewn up. And there is the back of the sweatpants. At this point, if you were going to put any sort of back outside pockets or welt pockets, anything like that, you would want to put those on before you sew the side seams together. At this point, we're going to pop over to the table, and I am going to put in those side seam pockets so you can see how an easy way to put those pockets in the side seam before you sew the side seam up. All right, so I'm going to pop back over, and we'll do that.
Sounds good. What is the word for today? We always have today is scoopiness.
Yeah.
That is your word, Emily, scoopiness.
May or may not be a real sewing term.
It is now. All right, we got you at the table.
That is something I struggle with, like what you call this seam, because often I will refer to it as like a crotch seam, which always feels like highly inappropriate to say, but I'm going to tell you what the official term is.
I know my brother one day called years ago when all of his boys, he has 3 boys, they were all small, and I was teaching how to alter pants.
Yes.
And the boys were all watching, and my brother texted me and said, if you say crotch seam one more time, my kids are not watching your sewing show. So I like scoopiness. We'll call it scoopiness.
When I'm writing it, I feel weird. When I'm saying it, I feel weird. So, okay. So here we have the pocket cut out, And it has this little straight edge or long straight edge, which is what we're going to attach to the side seam. And then also this pocket is made that the top of it is going to line up with the top of the pants. And so it will be caught in the waistband seam to keep that from flopping around. All right. So we want to actually make sure we keep the placement. So this is the front of the pants that I have here. And I'm going to, before I sew the side seam, I'm just simply, sorry, I got tissue paper coming at me. I'm going to simply sew this straight seam here. You can sew it with your sewing machine. You can sew it with the serger. I'm actually going to sew it with the sewing machine so that we keep the seam allowance and it doesn't cut it off with the serger. So then you're going to find the opposite. I'm putting the right sides together of the pocket and the pant. Okay, sometimes, well, or maybe I should put the right. So it depends on if you want the right side of the fabric or the wrong side of the fabric to be inside your pant. When I do this, the right side was going to be out, which I like that because then if it shows, so our pocket won't quite be as cozy as it could if I flipped it around. But if it shows coming from the outside of the hole, then you'll see at least the right side of the fabric. So you can think about that if you want to determine that a little bit different. So, okay, so normally when you're sewing your pockets to both the front and the back, you want to make sure that you place them obviously so that they line up with the side seam. Mine hopefully will line up pretty well without doing this because I'm lining up for the top, along the top, but I am just going to place this side by side to make sure that these flat edges are lining up. And I have to find, where did my fourth, oh, there it is, fourth pocket piece. Okay, so we'll just put these side by side, lining up the top. You can also, of course, have measured, okay, we're placing the notch 2 inches down from the top of the pocket, or you can do this very official way of just laying it right next to each other. A lot of times when I sew, I do these are my unofficial ways to get things done. Okay, so now we have the 4 pockets pinned onto the 4 sides of 2 on the front and 2 on the back. And we're gonna go ahead and just stitch straight down using a pretty narrow seam allowance, probably still about that 1/4 inch down to attach the pocket to the pants, okay? So we're gonna switch over to the sewing machine and go ahead and do that.
All right, while you're switching, I will double check if there's comments. So a couple of things I know people are gonna ask is the difference between the serger thread you use, and you mentioned woolly, which is a lot softer, woolly poly, woolly nylon. So there's a difference in those threads for the serger. One, because it's really soft, like baby clothes. Have you ever felt the inside of baby clothes? That's for the woolly poly, woolly nylon. And that's just a type of thread. I only use it in the loopers though. Don't use it in the needles. So I know that that's a question a lot of people ask. So,
yes.
All right, back to you, Emily.
Yes. So I actually only have it in one looper. The one that uses the most thread, you can use it in both, obviously, but I had like one spool of this thread open, and so I just threw it on there when I was doing it. But it does make your seams a little bit softer, especially when the inside of your pants is super soft. You want something that will kind of go along with that so you don't feel the seams. And my daughter is definitely one who is a little bit more sensitive to seams, or like if I embroider something on her shirt, sometimes she's like, the inside is scratchy. So, I have to use a backing and make sure it's nice and soft. So, so that's just, it absolutely doesn't really affect the functionality, but it just does make it feel a little bit nicer on the inside of your seams. Okay, so I have red thread on this machine, threading the needle. All right, so we're just gonna go ahead and with a straight stitch, because I actually am gonna be sewing over this with the serger, so I'm not really worried about it stretching, because this is essentially just basting that on there. So we're just going to sew. I actually am not even going to worry so much about like back stitching or all that. Essentially, this is just a basting stitch, but I'm not, you can make it really long, I guess, if you want, but I'm just going to maybe make it like a 3 millimeter on there and just sew down that pocket. And that just will make it a lot easier to sew here in a minute when we're sewing up the side seam on the serger. Now, I do like to sew the side seam on the serger. Can you get all the way perfectly around a pocket with your serger? No. So I usually then have to come back to the sewing machine to get the tight corners and fill in the gaps of what I couldn't sew around the pocket, because we're going to sew down from the top, around the pocket, and then down the rest of the side seam. And I won't be able to do that perfectly on the serger. I like to do the 98% that I can do, and then come back and fix the little bit that I can't do. So I'll show you that process. But again, this will be the most complicated part of making these pants, is simply putting the pockets in, and it's really not complicated, but it just takes a little bit of time. Sweatpants without pockets take me about 10 minutes to sew, because there's not very much to it. After you've sewn the scoopy seam, then you can sew the side seams, and just then you have the finishing touches. So it can go really quick, but I know pockets are always appreciated. So I'll take the extra few minutes to add those in. All right, so now on all sides of your sweatpants, you should have these pockets that are sticking out or fold in like we just had them, but stick out. And then that's why I put the right sides together. So even when this is folded inside, if you do happen to see a little bit sticking out, it's the right side of the fabric rather than that wrong side of the fabric sticking out. So again, a little bit not as soft of a pocket, but I think is worth it just so you have this nice seam here. All right, we're gonna go back and pin the side seams together, or at least around the pocket. We're gonna pin those, and then we'll be able to sew up the side seams.
All right, let me bring you back here while you are switching tables. Any questions, drop them in the chat. We're live in the chat today. And I'm with you that if there were no pockets, this would be the fastest project ever, which is why sometimes I avoid the pockets.
Yes. Well, I definitely have done that. I recently made Rose a very cozy sweatshirt dress. And her first question was, when I asked her to try it on, does it have pockets? And then I had to say, no, it doesn't have pockets. So today I knew that I had to add pockets to this project. All right, so what we are sewing here, we're gonna sew this little thing. I'm not gonna attempt that on the serger. It's a very small area. I'd probably be able to sew just a tiny bit of it before I would run into this. Then we're also gonna sew, this I will do on the serger, around this pocket pouch. Okay, so I'm just gonna put a few clips or pins to hold the pouches together. And then here's the other part that's difficult to do on the serger. You're going to come up here and then go down the side seam. And it will be difficult to get up in here, make that sharp turn and back down. So I probably will stop and then start again as close as I can to the top. And then I'll just go in with my sewing machine. Again, this fabric isn't gonna fray, so I'm not really worried about leaving a few little bits of raw edge that aren't covered with the serger thread. And then we'll just be able to go straight down the leg. All right, so we're gonna do the same thing on this side, put a few clips to hold everything in place before we pop over and sew this. Sometimes with sweatshirt fleece, I like using like a thinner cotton lycra or something for the pockets, because sweatshirt fleece pockets can get a little bit bulky, especially if it's more of a fitted garment. Today I'm going with the actual sweatshirt fleece pockets. We'll see if I regret it afterwards, but I'm hoping that this waistband is gathered enough that it looks okay and you don't see like these huge pockets in the front of your pants. And I also sometimes will just put sweatshirt pockets on the outside, like a cute decorative pocket. That sometimes helps to avoid some of the bulk as well. So, okay, there we have the 2 pockets, kind of looks like ears hanging off of your pants. And we're ready to sew around the pockets and down the side seams. Because I have the camera already focused on the sewing machine, I think I'm going to start with stitching this up here at the top and this V shape down here at the bottom, and then we'll flip over and just finish up the rest of it on the serger. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do that.
All right, well, she flips back over there. That's a good tip, though, on the thicker fabric to do the pocket on the outside. I like that. I mean, that's a very trendy way to look at it as well.
Yeah. I don't know if my kids like that as much. I know I don't prefer it as much, but it does take away some of the bulk if you just put on. And if you'll go back and actually look at those sweatpants that I showed you of the kids wearing them many years ago, they were one of the versions. Rose had pockets on the outside of her pants. So it is a way to you still use the thicker decorative fabric, but not have the bulk on the inside. Okay, so again, we're gonna just stitch those places that would be tricky to sew with the serger. And we're gonna actually come up and around this so we don't have this as an open hole. It will be all sewn in, and this top will be sewn on to the waistband, but I just want to make sure we don't have a place where you could lose anything out of your pocket. So we're going to sew that top V right there, and then we're going to do the same thing on the underside of the pocket, because again, those sharp corners are very tricky and not even worth trying to do on the serger, because I just end up frustrated. And of course, worst case, you end up cutting something with the serger blade that you don't want to cut. So that's always my worst nightmare. And I have done it more than enough. I always know if I'm sewing late at night, it's time to go to bed, because I end up like cutting something that I shouldn't or sewing something that I shouldn't. And I can think of a very distinct way where I cut through like the bodice of a very pretty dress that was almost finished. But I actually miraculously saved it by putting some beautiful embroidery over it. So it ended up to be a really cute project in the end, but it was time for bed. It was time for bed. So
that's a good save, Emily. Add a little embroidery when you put a hole in your outfit.
I know. I ended up writing like a full tutorial of like how to save a cut mistake by adding embroidery. All right, so we're just sewing around these. All right, so now we have hopefully those sharp corners sewn up, and if I end up overlapping with the serger, that will be perfect. This is just to hold everything in place, and when I don't get into those tight corners, then I know it's still going to be held in place, and we're going to have a secure seam that isn't going to go anywhere. So let me just adjust the camera back to the serger, and we will.
All right. While she's adjusting it back, if you have comments and questions, and also don't forget, I'm just going to bring this up real quick. Don't forget, January is almost over, and Brothers offering that great rebate for the Avenir. If you didn't get it from Santa, at $1,200, you can turn in any sewing machine of any value of any brand to your Brother dealer. Tell them that you're part of the Wolf Pack, and you get $1,200 in a rebate. So that's not too bad. Not too shabby, if you ask me. So don't forget about that one. And then also visit your Brother dealer for some good deals. So I think I got you back, Emily. Yep. There you are.
That's an incredible deal. Good work.
Any brand, any value. I was like, I had to double check that. Wow.
Totally. That, which is amazing. Yeah, that's great. All right. So again, I'm starting just sewing around the pocket. On a pocket, you want to just any seam, but you want to very much make sure that you're catching both layers of fabric around all the curves, or you will end up with a hole in your pocket, which is never helpful. And then I see here where I sewed on the sewing machine, so I'm going to make sure I'm overlapping that before I pull off the stitches. And then the same thing, we're gonna start here. Sometimes it's helpful to sort of tuck that pocket either forward or back completely out of the way so that you can get that fabric sort of shoved under your presser foot. And if I come back and I'm like, oh, I didn't sew down far enough, that's a very easy thing that you can still go back and use your sewing machine to stitch, down a little bit farther to catch any spot where you didn't make the connection. So I am just lining up this fabric. I didn't clip it all the way down. This fabric doesn't really slip and slide, so it's quite easy. In fact, it's like kind of sticky like felt where it stays together well. I am sewing down the side to the bottom. Looks like it's gonna line up beautifully, but because I lengthened the bottom of these pants just by holding up another pair to the pattern, I don't always make sure that I've lengthened both sides, the front and back, exactly the same, because I know when I hem it, I'll just be able to even it up. But these came out pretty close there to a perfect lengthening. So pat on the back, I did a good job on doing that. But sometimes I'm like, okay, I'm going to add an inch, and it's like an eyeball inch. And then I come back and I fix it when I'm hemming. So my side seams aren't always perfect. All right, so we're sewing around the second pocket. You can see I'm taking a little bit bigger seam allowance. It's a pretty big pocket. I'm not worried about that. It doesn't have to fit anyone. And I just want to make sure that I'm getting it fully attached so that is a very secure pocket for actually using it and storing things in it. And then down the second side of the pant. This pattern, if you don't add pockets and you actually leave the pattern as one piece, then you literally have to sew the inseam after you've sewn the curve seam. So very, very quick. We could even eliminate this whole side seam here if you didn't have the pockets as well. But pockets are worth it every time. I can appreciate her asking for pockets, so we'll make sure that she gets it. So let's just take a quick look at how the pocket looks on the side seam here. Okay, so there you can see there's the pocket. I'm trying not to turn these right side out because I still have to go and sew that inseam, but just trying to give you a little peek. It's a nice big pocket. It fits my hand. If you want to, then you can actually top stitch or under stitch. So sometimes I will go from the back side and just fold this over here and do a top stitch of this seam allowance. And that gives a nice top stitching without all the bulk of all the layers. So top stitch or under stitch your seam allowance, which I'll do later. And then we're going to move on to the inseam. And we're going to start by lining up the middle, the curved scoopy seam here. And then we're going to work our way down from there. And I'm just going to put every 6 to 8 inches a clip to make sure that this lines up. Oh, look at that. So nice as it lines up on the bottom as well. And I'm thinking this is going to be, I didn't measure it against anything, but a pretty good wide leg. Is it extreme wide leg? No, but I think it's going to be wide enough that it's going to look really good. So we're going to keep going down, because we have to start at the end. I don't start in the middle. So I want to make sure that it's all lined up before I start sewing. All right. Looks like it's pretty good. At this point, if I needed to trim anything, I would go do that. But we are all set to start sewing. And then you're going to start at the bottom of one leg and then sew up to the center and down the other leg. This is where I'm going to try not to take much more than the assigned seam allowance because I don't want to take off any of the width. And of course, I don't want to take off any of the fit once I get to the more fitted part. Again, who am I kidding? These sweatpants aren't really fitted, but I just don't want to take out any of the width that I gave these pants. If you feel that this top of the inseam, where all the seams meet, right? You have your front seam and your back seam meeting in the middle. There are times, depending on the fabric, where I feel that sewing over with the serger isn't as secure as I want, especially say with like leggings, because I know that that part is going to get a lot of pull. It is totally fine to go back and reinforce with a zigzag stitch or another stitch on your sewing machine just to give some extra reinforcement. Otherwise, I am not someone who ever sews a seam and then serges it. And also probably because I'm not sewing like super technical things where I need to baste them. Sometimes if it's like a really gathered something, yes, I will baste it and then I will serge it. But I do see videos of people, they completely sew and then they just use this for finishing the raw edges. I actually use it for sewing the seams 99% of the time. So, but this is someplace where if I didn't feel like this was a very secure seam with all of the seams coming together, I would maybe go and reinforce that. But with sweatpant fleece, I feel pretty confident it's not going to have a lot of stretch and we're going to be just fine in that department. And it lined up perfectly there on my inseams. So way to go. All right, we're going to turn this right side up. We're going to head up to the cutting table and I'm going to attach, actually, before I do that, I'm going to make sure we're going to sew the narrow side of the waistband.
Oh, yeah.
So that I can just then go ahead and pin or clip it on. It's a little bit big. Oh boy, maybe I should officially. Thankfully it stretches. I don't feel like I have to make sure it's exact. All right, got a little finger pinch. We're going to sew it straight down here. If we need to adjust, we'll come back and sew that. But I'm sewing the waistband into a circle so that when we go up and I pin or clip it on, we can do the whole thing. So, all right, now we're headed back. We're going to attach. Oh boy, I just turned off my camera.
That's all right. I got you covered. I was like watching because I'm looking at your pants and they match my shirt. So I think I should probably wear it today.
Well, my plan is to make a matching sweatshirt for Rose with this. So my middle son is playing basketball right now, and one of their school colors is red. And I found this really beautiful red sweatshirt fleece. So I was like, Rose needs a whole red outfit. So she
and actually, that's the big
thing.
trend right now, Emily, is the matchy.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. I thought I was back to the 80s again. My nephews, I bought them, I should have made it, but I bought them sweatshirts and they're like, they want matching sweatpants. I was like, you match? They have to match.
Yes. No, I mean, yeah, like women, adult women is very, like the matching. I don't have so many of the matching outfits. I'm a bit more like piece it together, but I know. I see the ads all the time. Okay, so you can see here again, the rise in the back is taller than the front. We have our inseam pockets, which actually are laying pretty nicely. So we'll have to see, obviously, once a body gets in here, if the bulk stands out more. But I'm pretty happy with how they just are laying on the side seam there. And then we're ready to put the waistband on. So I measured Rose this morning. She said I had very cold hands as I was getting this measurement for her elastic. But we're going to line up I'm folding this in half, right sides out. We're going to line it up with the back. So I like to put that in the back so that she knows where the back of the pants are. I would say that's my kids' biggest complaint with homemade things is if I don't label the back and the front, which I don't always do. And they're like, we have no idea which way's the front on a t-shirt. They can't seem to figure it out. But so that's We have the seam here. This is a seam. That's pretty obvious there. Sometimes I'll put a tag, but I feel like they don't want the tags on the inside. And now that they're getting bigger, they don't really want my cutesy Life Sew Savory tag on the outside either. So sometimes it's hard to win. Okay, so we are just lining up all 3 layers of fleece. Okay, this is going to be a little bit thick, but the serger can totally handle it. All 3 layers of fleece all the way around this waistband. And now when I sew, I am going to leave an opening to thread the elastic. I like to leave it in the back, but actually I don't like to leave it where the seams are because it's harder for me to close it when I'm trying to line up all those seams. So I'll probably leave it just to one side or the other of those seams. And thankfully there's a little bit of grace with this waistband. I mean, I cut it as close as I could to the right size, but there's about 25% stretch in this sweatshirt fleece, so we don't have to be perfect. We can either stretch the pants a little bit or we can stretch the waistband a little bit to make sure that it's going to work with our elastic. Okay, let's sew that up. We are getting so close. Unfortunately, I'm not going to hem these today with you because I want to make sure that they're the right length on rows before I hem them, but I am going to just sew this up and then put the elastic in, and then I do like to top stitch the elastic. So let's sew up the waistband.
Sounds good. And also, we do have some videos on Brother Sews. If you want to go on there and see how to hem using the Brother cover stitch machine, we have that. We also have hemming with the twin needle. So many different options. And if you don't have any of that, you could use a zigzag stitch. I don't know. What's your favorite way, Emily? What's your favorite hemming way?
I mean, before I had the cover stitch, I used the double needle. I had perfected that method on my sewing machine. But then now that I have the cover stitch, it's very hard to want to go back.
I agree.
All right, so the most important thing when you're sewing this is just to make sure all 3 layers are being caught in your fabric. And then also when we get around, this is on the front. We want to catch the top of this pocket in that waistband seam as well. So that is going to add, I am realizing now that's like 5 layers of fleece. So we'll see how this machine does. I have confidence in it, but thankfully I just put some new needles on. All right, so we're getting around 3 layers in there. And then we want to make sure we bring the other pocket up. I should have pinned or clipped those. Usually I do, I just sort of kind of forgot, but I'm going to pull this up and add it into this clip right now so that it's in place and I don't forget it. And then when I come back around, I want to make sure that I am stopping and leaving that hole for the elastic as well. So don't want to forget that. All right, I like to do a quick check on the outside to make sure there are no obvious holes. Okay, there's a thread. But looks like we are in business with the waistband. So we're gonna grab the elastic. I'm gonna grab my bodkin here. And we're gonna thread the elastic through the casing that we just made. So with wide elastic, I feel like it's actually easier than with narrow elastic to make sure you don't twist it because it's so wide. So, you know, it's pretty obvious if this gets twisted, it should lay really nice and flat. And it's pretty obvious when it doesn't. So let's just go along here.
I like the wider elastic too. You know, sometimes, have you ever done this, Emily, where you feel like the elastic's going to twist or you're nervous about that, and I'll run a seam through all the layers just to hold the elastic in place.
Yes,
Sometimes I'll run it at the side.
I was going to top stitch. I usually like to do like one about, I don't know, 3/8 of an inch from the bottom and 3/8 of an inch from the top on the elastic to kind of have two layers of decorative stitching. And then it definitely, with the wide elastic, holds it from twisting, because yeah, rather than a narrow elastic, I might just sort of tack at the side seams to keep it from twisting. Sorry, I'm trying to keep this from pulling inside my casing here, but I pinned it in the way. So now we had to pin it in a different spot. All right. So we're coming back out, and you can sew your elastic with a serger, or you can sew your elastic with a sewing machine. The sewing machine is a better option. So I'm gonna try and move this real quick.
I'll just pop you out just for a second, so you're all moved. That way. And again, drop your questions below. This is a really fun, easy project. So is that elastic about 3 inches wide, or how wide is that?
It's 2 inches, actually.
2 inches. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'm overlapping, say, 1/4 inch on the elastic, and then we're just going to do a wideish sort of zigzag down the overlap, and that gives a nice flat connection on your elastic. Okay. So you can see it well with the thread. Then you can pull it inside the casing. And now we have to sew up this opening here. I'm not going to move, no, I'm not going to move the camera again. I'm just going to do this real quick on the serger. You guys can see the top of it here. Sorry, but I can just do this lickety split, and then we'll be able to move on rather than keep adjusting. So that opening that we left, it was about 3 inches maybe. I'm just serging it up. Okay, so that now that is closed and we're ready to move on. So this is what I like to do with, oh my goodness, they're so cute.
Those are adorable, Emily. Oh my gosh, she is going to love those. And I like the wider leg. That's very cute.
I think this is going to be a hit. I do want to make sure I measure the length though. All right. So what I like to do when I top stitch the elastic is I like to pull and tug it so that it's all, evened out. And then with pins, although I hardly use pins, I actually do put some pins in several places around the waistband to hold the gathers evenly while I'm sewing. And then I feel like when you're finished, this makes sure that all the gathers of the fabric don't get stuck in one place, and you actually have like an evenly gathered waistband. So you can do one seam down the middle that will hold it in place. I like to do, like I said, like a little bit from the top and a little bit from the bottom. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try and adjust the camera just slightly. Sorry. So you can see better.
All right, well, I'll just wait till she gets back there, and this is the last step. This step is optional. You don't have to do it, but it just looks nice. It looks professional.
Yes. If you didn't do this step, then I would take a straight stitch and run it down the side seams to match the side seams of my pants. Usually I'll do it on the back seam, and the other side seam, I won't usually do it in the middle, even though there's a seam in the front of the pants. So I'll usually do those 3 places to just tack the elastic in place. And even on ready to wear clothes, you would see this sort of tack down to help it not twist in the wash. I'm going to start at the back, and I'm going to sew with the right side up because I want that red the red out. We're going to do a straight stitch. We're going to set it at 3.5, so it's a little bit longer of a stitch. I'm going to use the edge of the presser foot as my guide going along there. And then what you need to do is you need to actually pull the fabric to the same length as it, so it's nice and flat, so that you are stretching the elastic as you sew. It will go back. And then so that you have a nice flat stitch, but then it will gather back up and it will have a nice finish on the waistband. So we're just going to stitch along there. It actually goes well on this side. It's pretty quick because this is not a very big waistband here, but just going around. You can see I'm putting one hand in the back and one hand on the front to pull. You don't want to actually pull the seam. You just want to pull the fabric so that it's flat and still let it go gliding through the machine as the machine is pulling it. So I'm trying not to pull it through the machine from the back. I'm literally just pulling it to flatten it out. And then I am removing the heads of the pins were in the way. So I did remove the pins, and I'll just sew the second one without the pins. Sometimes I actually start on the bottom one because it's a little bit trickier. Okay, so now we're gonna move down, and I'm gonna line my presser foot with the bottom side of the elastic or the seam, and then we're just gonna sew along that bottom side. I will say sometimes when I put these 2 stitches of elastic or 2 stitches of sewing on elastic, it doesn't have as good of recovery. So sometimes I will cut the elastic maybe like a 1/2 inch to 1 inch shorter than I would have otherwise, because it's sort of getting a little bit stretched out in doing this. It still has, I mean, it's gonna do the job of pulling the pants up, but I think sometimes this does stretch it out slightly. So just adding a little extra length, little less length, sorry, will just help it to be nice and fitted. Depends on what it is that how fitted you need it to be. All right, now let's take a look. So there's the waistband, so cute, right? I feel like that really adds to it. We have the pockets here, and this is ready for a try on.
Wow, this is so cute, Emily. The pants turned out adorable. Rose is going to love them big time.
I hope so. They look really cute. So I'm excited about them, and hopefully she likes them, and we'll make sure they're a good length, and then we'll finish them up. It will take not very long, but I might, like I said, I didn't understitch or top stitch the pockets. I might do that. I'll see how it looks on her. Right now they're laying really nice in the side seam, but I just would want to make sure that they continue to do that when they're on someone. So
they look fabulous. So I put your website, it's scrolling below. If you are on social media, be sure to follow all of us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, subscribe to Brother's channel. You won't miss a thing. And maybe next month, Emily, you can go back and make the matching sweatshirt.
It might already be made by the time next month rolls around. We'll have to see what I'm working on. But if I don't get it made, that would make an excellent follow-up. I'll have to decide what kind of sweatshirt I'm going to make. But yes,
it definitely would.
Yes.
Another great project, super cute, super easy. You can find the pattern on Emily's website. You can also see Brother's website. And I have the full calendar on angelawolf.com if you want to see what's coming up or what you've missed. Emily, this was awesome. And because we didn't bring your comments up, if you have questions, even if you're watching the replay, leave them below. And Brother's Social will send them to us to answer for you.
Yes.
All right. Until next time, happy sewing.
Thanks.